Today's daf is Eruvin Daf Pezayin. Today's daf is dedicated by Kate Weinberger for Refuah Shlema for her dear sister Helen Taylor, Chana Bat Chava, as well as a Refuah Shlema to her beloved grandson Yuval Mironi, Yuval ben Elisheva Sarah, who's undergoing major surgery today, Atzlacha, and by Caroline Ben Ari in honor of her 65th birthday, Mazal Tov. Okay, we're going to start now at the bottom of Pei Vav Amud Bet. Before we start there, I want to refresh your memory about the Mishnah on Pei Vav Amud Aleph. We were dealing yesterday with the case of a pit or a well full of water that's standing right in between two courtyards. So how do we each take water from there? There was a whole debate. Do we need mechitzot inside, all the way inside? How, what height, etc.? Is it to make sure the water doesn't mix? Or is it just noticeable, as if we don't really want the water to mix, even though we know the water is technically mixing? But Rabbi Yehuda had a very lenient approach. And he said that it's enough that we just take the fact that there's a wall in between the two courtyards, because we know courtyards are always surrounded by walls. As long as there's a wall there, we view that wall as if it goes down. So that's sufficient for us, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So then we dealt with Rabbi Yehuda's approach, right? And we said, is he holding by Rabbi Yossi? And then we said, no, him and Rabbi Yossi, who talked about a mechitzat tluya that's materet with water, right? That's not necessarily the exact same thing. That's where we ended yesterday. Now we're going to say, the Rabbah says, 5 lines from the bottom, the last word on the line, Amar Rabbah, the last from Pei Vav Amud Bet, Rabbi Yehuda v'Rabbi Chananya ben Akavia amru davar echad. Okay, what's nice today is we're going to start with Rabbi Chananya ben Akavia. We're going to leave him after a while, and then we're going to go back to him at the very end of today's daf. So we're now going to say that Rabbi Yehuda, and this is a classic thing that a lot of rabbis like to do. In fact, one time we discussed it, that there's certain people who do it more often than others. Rabbah's not one of them. From what I remember, it was Abaye and maybe Rabbi Yochanan, I don't remember, but that there's this attempt to kind of put different approaches in different cases together and say they really believe one and the same. Okay, so he's going to suggest that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Chananya ben Akavia amru davar echad. They both agree. What they're saying is based on the exact same principle. So where are we going to see that? Rabbi Yehuda had amaran. So the big chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda is not just that we can say, it's really 2 things. Number one, we can view this mechitza, this wall between our chatzerot, as if it goes all the way down. But number 2, it's that we don't need to make a special mechitza for this bore. We can use an existing mechitza that was built for some other reason. Right? It was built because you needed a mechitza between the courtyards. And we can use that. We don't need something that's a noticeable indicator, right? That's clearly not noticeable indicator because it's the wall between the courtyards. So in order to split this water, you don't need anything special. It's already got a divider. Even though it wasn't built for this purpose to split the water, it was built as a divider between the courtyards, and that's sufficient. So now, Rabbi Chananya ben Akavia, what's he going to say that's going to be similar to this? Ditanya. It says Ditnan, it should be Ditanya. Ditnan means we learn in a Mishnah. Ditanya means we learn in a Braita. So whenever it says Ditnan and they can't find any Mishnah, they say it must be a mistake and it must be Ditanya, right? Where did you come up with a mistake like this? Because if you write Taf Nun with a chupchik, right, like a little line there, they used to shorten. So when the person who prepared it for the printing, he didn't always know everything, was it a Mishnah or was it not in the Mishnah? Again, if it's not in the Mishnah, then we'll call it a Braita because that's just things that weren't included in the Mishnah. So sometimes he wrote, he filled in the word Ditnan rather than Ditanya, right? Whether it was the person preparing for the printing or maybe just people who were copying manuscripts before that. Anyway, there's a lot of mistakes like that in general. So it says in the Braita, Rabbi Chananya ben Akavia omer, Gezuztra sheyesh ba 4 amot al 4 amot, okay, before I explain this, I want to just go. In fact, I'll show you, since we're going to get to this at the end of the day, the picture I want to show you is at the very last picture. So the very last picture shows us these gezustrot that we discussed. If you want to get water, remember we talked about, let's say you live in Venice or your house is right outside your house is water, and you want to draw water on Shabbat. So what do you do? Until now we've talked about, you have a little ledge that comes out, this gezustra, a balcony, a ledge, something. You make a hole in it that's 4 by 4. And then you build, why does it have to be 4 by 4? Well, because you want to build a mechitza that goes, now you see from this picture, you can either build it below the gezustra or above the gezustra. It doesn't matter as long as it's either above the hole you build or beneath the hole that you carve out. We basically can view that we call good achit mechitza we can say those mechitzot imaginarily can drop all the way down. And then you basically have what we call, right, a 4x4. That's always our shiur for something significant. 4x4 with your 10 tefachim walls. Once the walls are 10 tefachim and they're a clear mechitza, we can then view them as if they go down. That's the basic halacha. But Hananya ben Akavia has a different approach. He says you don't need that. Okay, we're actually not going to have a picture yet of him. We'll see a picture soon of his stuff, but I built something to show you. He basically says all you need is a gezustra, that's a square gezustra. Okay, I'm holding it up, but it should be, right, obviously standing like a balcony. You just need a balcony that's the size of, okay, mine is cut up, but imagine it's not cut up yet. It's a size of 4 amot by 4 amot. Every amma is 6 tfachim, 24 by 24 tfachim, handbreadths. Now, why is that? And then what does he say? You take your gezustra. So let's say you have a porch that size. That's all you need. You just need to make a hole that's 4 by 4 tfachim. If you make a whole 4 by 4 tfachim, this is great. Now, why is that? Okay, so the way it works is like this. If it's 24 and you cut out 4 by 4, that means on every side you're going to have 10, right? If you put 4 by 4 in the middle, you cut that out and the whole thing is 24. So you now have 10 on this side, 10 on that side, right? It's a square. So 10 on every side. Now, if you cut them, you see I cut them into strips, okay? If you can't see, I'm sorry. You might want to just take a quick look at the YouTube video today for the beginning of shiur, because it's very helpful if you're not watching on YouTube. But basically, you cut these strips, you fold them down. It reminds me of one of these things that you get like on the airplane. They give the kids toys and they have like dotted lines and perforations and you can cut and create. Oh, I know what it is. They make like these dice for the plane rides. And for the kids' games, they make a die that you basically put together, right? You cut on the perforation, you end up with this. So that's what he says. We can view it. Now, again, this is all in the world of imagination. We don't have to do this. We just say, if it's 4 by 4 and you have enough to make these walls of, you can make basically 4 walls of 10 by 10. Because if you cut these strips that are 10 tfachim long, 4 tfachim wide, then around your hole of 4 by 4, you now have 4 imaginary walls of 10. So here's your, right, there's your walls, and those are your 4 imaginary walls. And voila, there you have it. So he basically says, all you need is 4 by 4 amot, which again is 24 by 24 tfachim. Now, that's actually pretty big to make a porch that size or a ledge that size. So we're going to talk about this soon, okay? It's not a makom tor in the middle. I see you're asking. It's not a makom tor. It's a space that's 4 by, right? That's 4 by 4 and 10 wide. That's actually a reshut yachid, right? It's its own unique reshut yachid. And the whole idea is that your reshut yachid can go all the way down. So then you can take it, right? You can get your water. The whole idea is we want to carry from your private house to the Carmelit. Now that's forbidden by rabbinic law. Because it's only rabbinic law, therefore we also have a way, a kula out of it. We have a situation. So therefore we can do this, right? I like right, they knew origami, right? That's what I was doing this morning, origami. Okay, so some people wake up early to exercise, other people wake up early to do cutouts. Okay, here we go. So now Amar Abai. So first Abai says, don't worry, there's lots more of these. I have 3 more. Amar Abai, Vidilma Lohi. No. Okay, well, let's remind us where we got started because we got a little sidetracked from trying to understand what he was talking about. But we tried to say that Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Hananya ben Akavia say the same thing because Rabbi Yehuda says your mechitza that exists in your courtyard, that's enough to say it can go down. And he says your ledge that you build, even if it doesn't have walls, is enough to be viewed as if it has walls. So both of them are basically saying we're creating this situation of imaginary walls. However, there's a very big difference between them, which Abai is going to say. But Dilma Lohi, you don't necessarily have to say these two are connected. It's interesting because Abai was one of the people that tries all the time to connect opinions. But here he disagrees. He says, there in Rabbi Yehuda's case, you have a wall. And we want to just say that wall can continue all the way down into the pit. We have an existing wall that we're using. But here, aval kof vigud lo. Kof with a kaf, not kof like a monkey, but kof is to bend. Here you have to do 2 things. It's not just that you say good achet mechitzta. We view these mechitzot as if they go down. First, you have to say we view the walls of the floor of the ledge as if they bend down, and then we say good achet mechitzta. But there's no actual mechitza here. So Rabbi Yehuda might not agree that kof ve good. Okay. The Adkan, and likewise, maybe Rabbi Hananya wouldn't agree with Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Adkan lokam Rabbi Hananya ben Akavia, and this we're going to see at the end of today's daf. Hatam, maybe he only said it there. Now he said it particularly to the people living in Tiberia. He said, for you living in Tiberia, this is what you can do to get water, presumably from the Kinneret. Why? Elabi amashal Tiberia. Maybe it's only for the Kinneret that was in Tiberia, Tiberias. Ho'il v'yesh ba'ognim v'ayarot v'karpifot mekifot ota. The whole problem is that we want to carry from our house or from the Carmelite of the Yam to our house. And what's the whole issue with the Carmelite? It's not forbidden by Torah law, it's forbidden by rabbinic law because it's similar to a public domain. But the Kinneret, Rabbi Hananya ben Akavia thought is different than all other waters. And it's when he permitted it to the people of Tiberia, they're assuming he only permitted it to the people of Tiberia and not to anybody else. And what's the reason? Because there's large banks, okay, deep banks, which means it looks like it has a wall. It has ayarot and karpifot mikifotota. It's very populated near it. And therefore, it's as if it has a wall protecting it. It's almost closer to Rishut Yachid than it is to Rishut Rabin. And that's why he allowed to take your water in this case. And he allowed this solution of imagining it bends down and goes down and drops down all the way to the water is only for a specific case like the Kinneret, Yam Shel Tveria. Okay, and it wouldn't be the same in every other case. So therefore, he wouldn't agree with Rabbi Yehuda that if you're living in Venice, for example, you can just do that. Okay, so now we're going to have the complicated section, which is Amar Abaye. Abaye now comes and says, well, I'm going to take Rabbi Hananya ben Akavia one step farther. It's true, he says, that you need 4 amot by 4 amot, right? And then you'll have to do these imaginary walls and whatever. But he says, let's apply this to other cases where, according to Rabbi Hananya, he thinks you even need smaller, because I think he also feels like that's a very big balcony to be building. And in certain situations, you can create the same reality that he created of 4 imaginary walls with less, okay? So how so? He says, L'divrei Rabbi Hananya ben Akavia, hayta smucha l'kotel, bepachom mishlosha tfachim. I'll pull up the picture for a second and then I'll shut the picture because I want to show you my diagram. But if your balcony jutted out from the wall, it wasn't directly up against the wall, it was within 3 of the wall, right? A little bit less than 3 away from the wall, which means we're going to use the laws of Levud, right? You're going to view it as if it's up against the wall. Now, why is this important? Because not only are we going to use Levud and say it's as if it's up against the wall, if it's up against the wall of your house can function as one of the walls, like a sukkah, right? If you put your sukkah walls near your house can be one of the walls. So that's going to obviously mean that we're going to need less imaginary walls, which means we can have a thing that's smaller. So how does this work? So now, okay, you're going to see here from the picture that they're going to cut out a shape of 1 tefach going out and 4 tefachim long. This is going to create in this cavity, since you already have, okay, in the middle of this, okay, we'll see here. Let me just read it for a minute. If it's muchalakot b'chomish shloshat tvachim, tzarich shehei orka 4 amot. You still need 4 amot of length, but rochba, the width, only needs to be 11 v'mashu. Remember, 4 is really 24 because it's 4 amot is 24 tvachim. The width only needs to be 11 tvachim and a bit. Okay, and then what are we going to do? We're going to cut out in the middle of this piece. Okay, I'm going to show you now on mine. We take our 10 by 24, our 11 by 24, and we're going to basically cut out a little section here. Now, this is the part that's up against the wall, but it's not up against the wall. It's distance from the wall. Again, you always need 4 by 4 tefachim opening. So when you cut out this one little space here that's 4 by 1, you're now going to join it. It's 4 by 1 and a bit. Okay, it's a little bit more than 1 that you're going to cut off because remember, it was 11 and a bit. So you're now going to cut off the bit and the 1, and you're going to be left with 10. You can see where we're going with this. So you'll be left with a strip of 10 by 4. So now, how does this work? This 1 by 4 that you cut out is going to join with the space up until the wall, which is 3 and less than a bit. So 3 and less than a bit plus 1 and a bit equals 4 exactly. So now you're going to have a space of 4 by 4 tefachim. That's where you're going to put your dli, not in the center like in the other one. This one, you're going to gain the wall basically because your hole is going to be up against the wall. So now your wall is going to be mechitza number 1. Now the length is 24. the strip of 4 tefachim wide in the middle, we're going to basically take, it's 10 by 4, we're going to drop it down, right? That's going to create our first wall. Now you're left with 2 parts on the side that are also 10 long because it was 24. And now you got rid of 4, you're left with 10 on each side. So now we have mechitza, mechitza, mechitza of 10 and the wall that exists there. So now you have your perfect mechitza. I'll show you again in the picture for a quick minute. Whether, you might relate to one diagram, mine is more than mine or more this one. Here, it's interesting. They dropped it down next to the wall. I would have thought to drop it down on the other side. Actually, when I was cutting, first I cut it the way they did it. And then I realized, well, probably you're better off with all 4 walls being more like in a square shape. So I'm not sure why they put it, because you can also drop it down. When I cut it, you could do both. You could drop it down on the far side. Okay, so that's how you get to your 4 walls. That was case number 1. Now, or really case number 2, it was an extension of case number 1. Now he's going to say something else. Haita zikufa. Okay, if you have the Quran, you'll see there's some different pictures of what this means. Rabbeinu Hananel has a different interpretation, but I'm going to stick with Rashi. If it was standing up, okay, here's your standing up board. Instead of your ledge being jutting out, your ledge is standing up. It's 4 away from the wall. Okay, well, it has to be 4 away from the wall because again, we need a space of 4 by 4. So if it's 10 by 6, okay, 6 and 2 mashus. Okay, let's read it inside. Okay, and then I'll show you. So we say here, it has to be 10 high again, because this is going to be one of your walls, right? It's going to be 4 away from the wall. So again, you're going to have a 4 by 4 section, right? Where one wall is this. One wall is your wall of your house, and now you still need 2 more. So how are you going to create 2 more walls? Again, we're going to use laws of lavud. Remember what lavud means. Lavud means we view this as if it's attached to the wall, as if, even though there's just a small thing here, as if this goes all the way from here to the wall. So if there's less than 3 in between, we're in good shape. So now what are we going to say? If it's 2 vimash, right? If this is 6 and 2 mashus, then what happens? We bend each side, that's a tefach and a bit. When we bend each side, that's a tefach and a bit. And then it's going to basically, with laws of lavud, remember, we're 4 away from the wall. So with a tefach and a bit, within 4 of the wall, right, we're going to basically say it's as if you have a wall of, right, the wall juts out 4. And the wall, right, the length is 10. So we're now going to have 2 walls on the sides, 1 wall here, right, 1 wall from the gazustra, and 1 wall from the house, and we're set. Okay, so again, these are all imaginary walls. Remember, we don't actually bend them in one, right? We just pretend it's as if by having it like this, and again, I'll pull up the picture here so you see it again visually in another way, we view as if each one of these is 1 and a bit in. That joins with din lavud because now it's less than 3 away from the wall, and basically it creates your 4 walls. Okay, so there we have the second extra case. Now, so Abaye stops there. But Rav Huna adds, Amar Rav Huna Bered Rav Yoshua, Haita omedet bekeren zavit. What if it was in the corner? Now in the corner, it's much better because you already have 2 walls of the house. So if you put it in the corner, now again, Rabbanit Michelle has a different interpretation, but assuming it's a vertical, we're talking it's a vertical gazustra, instead of needing 10 by 6 and 2 mashus, you need 10 by 2 and 2 mashus. Tzarich shehu gavho 10 tvachim, okay, now what is that? Because each one, okay, now the assumption here is that the distance you put it from the wall is going to be 3 by 4. That's why I drew a rectangle. This is not part of your gazustra. This is just the distance it is from the corner. So here's your corner. Okay, this is your corner wall. So you have 2 walls here. Now, where it juts out 3, you're going to put it, it's a little less than 3. So you're going to put it 1 vimashahu, right? You're going to, again, imagine you break this, you fold this in half. So 1 in mashu is going to be on this side. That's going to create, right? You had a space of 3. You need to get to a space of 4 because you need your whole to be 4 by 4. So this juts out 1 and a bit. That gets you from a little less than 3 to 4. And then it's going to basically, okay, if you can see it from here, I'll try to show you. So here's where it was 3. We put it next to it, right? Jutting out there. Then where it's 4, it's going to be, okay, here it's 4. It's going to be up against the corner where it's 4. It's going to sit like this. Okay, again, this white piece that I have at the bottom is just the airspace. So where it's 4, it's going to connect with the 4 wall, and it's going to create a wall of 4. So we're basically going to have a wall up against this 4, right? It's going to, in all those cases with din levud, we're going to view it right there where it's on the space where there's 4 jutting out. You're going to need a tefach and mashu of this thing to jut out so that it attaches to the wall, because the wall, you have a space of 4. So you're going to need a tefach and a bit in order for it to basically be up against the, be viewed as if it creates its own mechitza. So that's how we create these 2 mechitzot, which basically close off into 4 walls. Okay, so I see, Adina, you wrote there's no levud if you're 4 away from the wall, but you're not 4 away from the wall because your thing sits at 4 away from the wall, but it has 1 and a bit that goes toward the wall there on that side. Okay, so that's how you end up with 4 walls. Okay, so now we're finished with all those complicated cases. Now the Gemara goes back to ask a really good question, which is, okay, Abaye and Rav Huna bar Rav Yoshua, you both said that theoretically, according to Rabbi Hananya ben Akavya, he said you need 4 amot, but 4 amot. You basically said, well, if it's up against the wall, if it's this, if it's that, right, you need actually much less. So then they question, well, then if you're saying, according to Hananya ben Akavya, you don't need it to be 4 by 4 amot, then why did he say you need 4 by 4 amot? Elaha de Tanya, the fact that it says in the Braita, Rabbi Hananya ben Akavya omer, guzutza sheyesh ba arba amot al arba amot, chokek ba arba al arba arba'ah, you cut out a hole of 4 by 4 tefachim, umimale, so hechi mishkachala. Why would you ever want to do that? If you didn't need to build a huge 4 by 4 amot gezustra, why would you ever do that? Now, what they do, they took what he said. They took it a few steps farther and said, well, according to him, you really don't need that. If you really don't need that, then why would he say that in the first place? It's a very good question. So the answer, Avida ki asita. It would be a case where you make it like a mortar. I assume what they mean is a mortar, like a mortar and pestle. A mortar stands by itself. So the case would be, now you have to understand exactly what this means, but because remember, you have your wall of your house, below is water, but somehow you were able to build, right? Sometimes they build things in water, maybe there's some sort of dock or I don't know, but somehow if you're able to build something out in the water and it happens not to be up against your wall. Okay, Rashi says that it's on yitedot, it's on, it's attached to pillars or something. Let's say there were pillars coming out of the water, right? You think about the aqueduct and, all that stuff that in Caesarea that Herod built. So theoretically, there could be things coming out of the water. And if you had a gezustra up there, you could use this, okay? That's when you would use this size, but otherwise you don't really need that size, okay? Tov. So I see someone asking, right, was this mental gymnastics for them or does it have real life application? I think specifically this has very real life application because their point is that if you hold like Hananya ben Akavya, which we're going to see later, they quote the Mishnah where it says about the gezustra, and it clearly says you have to build a mechitza 10, and clearly they didn't hold like him. But if you were to hold by him, what Abaye and Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananya are saying is that, Rav Yoshua is saying, is that you wouldn't even need such a big one. And yeah, you could do this in a very easy manner. Right? As long as you build it in the right way. This is like a architect giving directions. If you build it in exactly this way, you can save yourself a lot of trouble, right? And this can allow you to draw water, which was incredibly important to them. So I think it's actually very practical. Okay, Mishnah. So is there a distance that the wall needs to be for the mortar case? Yeah, it would have to be anything that's more than 4 tefachim already. If you can't use din levud to get it connected to the wall, right? Then already you're not going to be able to use your wall. Once you can't use your wall, then you're going to need this solution. Okay. So we're going to move on. And right, I see Shoshana, you're bringing up Levud. Wait till we're going to get to Levud later today about Rashbag, his whole approach to Levud, and if that connects with our sugya or not, it's a good thing. So good you're mentioning it. What Shoshana is reminding us, which we'll see later, is that there's a machloket about Levud. Normally we always say Levud is less than 3, but is anything less than 3. But Rashbag said it's anything less than 4. So obviously you'd have to recalculate the measurements according to him. Okay, new Mishnah. Let's say you have a channel going through your courtyard. Okay, now what's the issue here? Well, the channel is water. Water, we generally say, is a carmelit. At what point is water a carmelit? Well, if it's 4 by 4 wide and 10 tefachim deep. Okay, so assuming it's 4 by 4 wide and 10 tefachim deep, although we'll see a discussion about this. So, because you're in your own private domain, it's true you have walls around, but again, the walls don't help you for what's underground, right? The walls aren't for the underground. other than Rabbi Yehuda, who thinks they do, which we'll get back to. So therefore, you're in your Rishon Echid and you want to take something from a Carmelite, that's not allowed. What do you have to do? You have to build onto your wall that exists, under your wall, where it's basically, you can see this very well if you have the pictures in 306. You basically have a mechitza under the wall, because under the wall, there's basically some, open space, and then the water that's going through from this channel. So you build a wall in that open space, or maybe it's even in the water, depending if your water level goes right up, right? Probably your water level is deeper. Otherwise, right, how are you going to live in this, right? The water will get all into your chatzir, right? It'll overflow into your chatzir. So assuming there's some airspace, you put a mechitza there, and then that basically blocks it off. So you need both baknisa uba yitzia, and then you're basically saying this part of the water channel is our property. Okay, and then you can do it. Obviously, if there's different residents living there, it's only if they did an Eruv. Okay, that's not their issue though. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, here comes Rabbi Yehuda again. Kotel shal gaba tidom mishum mechitza. Oh, it's already got its own wall in the courtyard. That's fine. Then already it designates this part of the channel as if it's yours, even though obviously the water is going back and forth and you're sharing water, just like with the bore between the two chatzerot. He holds the exact same thing here. And in fact, he proves it with a story. This is a city that was near Tzipori. There was this maaseh that happened, a story that happened with, it was a case with a channel that was going through the city, and they would allow them to do it even without mechitza. The rabbi said to him, that's not a proof, and this is a great example. You bring a situation, but you don't always know all the details. So the rabbi said, oh, you got the details wrong. That wasn't a Carmelite. That was not 10 deep or not 4 wide, and that's why they allowed it. But once it has all the criteria of Carmelite, 4 wide, 10 deep, then already you're not allowed to do this. So they disagreed about the details of the case. Tanu Rabbanan. So first we're going to quote some Brightot about these cases. Okay, they're going to be very similar to the Mishnah. Asula b'knisa v'lo asula b'yitzia. What if you put a mechitza on one side, on the entrance, not the exit? Or asula b'yitzia v'lo asula b'knisa, or the reverse. Again, the rabbis need a noticeable difference, right? To you to say, this is ours. But the other places, right? Rabbi Yehuda doesn't require anything noticeable. He says, as long as there's a mechitza, we can view that mechitza going down. We don't need any, what we call in Hebrew, a hekel, something noticeable. It doesn't need to be noticeable, it's fine. So they say, one side mechitza isn't enough, you need both sides. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Kotel shal gabati dom mishum mechitza. This is just a repeat of what we saw in the Mishnah. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda Maaseh ba'amat hamayim shaita ba me'avel tzipori. Here they say it was going from Avel to Tzipori. Vayum malim hemenu b'Shabbat al pi azkenim. And again, Amru lo misham raya mipnei shelo hayta amuka sarat tvachim v'rochba arba. Didn't have the v'rochba arba'a. Didn't have the criteria of 10 by 4. Okay, that was kind of a repeat. Now they're going to bring another source. Tanya Idach. Let's say you have a channel going in this Carmelite next to the windows. Okay, the windows of the people reach out to, you can get from your window to the water. If it's less than 3, now I'm specifically saying if it's less than 3, we're going to see 3 opinions what it is. What has to be less than 3? We don't yet know. Okay, so if it's less than 3, you can see here the way they show it is the banks of there's basically your window. There's a ledge, let's say on the ground between you and the water, and then there's the water. So if the agafim, the banks are less than 3, that's what the picture shows, but we're going to see there's 3 different opinions about it. It's not so clear. It's always the problem with the picture. It's hard to show multiple opinions in a picture. So if it's less than 3, you can take your water from there and bring it into your house on Shabbat. Rashbag Omer, and here Shoshana, you mentioned this, Rashbag says, Pachome arba'a mishalshel tli u'memale, arba'a em mishalshel tli u'memale. Now it's unclear whether the machloket Rashbag here, Rashbag says, less than 4 you can do it. If it's 4, already you can't do it. But he disagrees because with Tanakamu says less than 3. Now it sounds like they're machloket about levut, which is 4 or 3. But we don't yet know how Levud works in here, and it's not going to necessarily be clear. Only the last explanation we're going to bring is going to say that this is the machloket about Levud, and it's relevant to this. The other ones don't. Now, you could still say that it's still dependent on their machloket rayoni perspective, from a theoretical perspective, because the issue is it 3 or 4? That's a significant measure, right? Which is the din for levud. So it could still be connected, but much more peripherally connected. So now let's see. Okay, b'mayas kinan. What are we talking about here? What is less than 3 or less than 4? If you mean the channel itself is less than 4 or less than 3. Ve'ela. But that doesn't make any sense. Now, why would it be the channel itself? What would be the relevance? If it's less than 4, then we're going to say it's not a Carmelit. Rashbag makes perfect sense. Tanakama is a little bit difficult because we always use, when it comes to Carmelit, we always talk about a Carmelit is 4. No one ever said a Carmelit is at 3, it's a Carmelit. So let's see. So they say, if you say it's talking about the channel itself is 3 wide or 4 wide, Dechiata Rav Dimi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, can't be, because he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Ein Carmelit Pchutame Arba'a. Carmelit is not, anything less than 4 is not a Carmelit. What do we call it? A Makom P'tur, right? An exempt space. So if that's the case, if he says it, right? He says a blanket statement. Lema Kitanai Amar Lishmata, you're going to say that he was just siding on one side of a Tanaitic debate between Tanakama and Rashbag, and we didn't know that? Sounds crazy. So therefore they say it can't be, that we never heard of this machloket, and that Rav Dimi just said it simply without commenting that he was siding on one side of the machloket. And I think maybe what's bothering them is that he's siding with Rashbag. Normally in the Vuv, we side by Tanakama. Why would he be siding with Rashbag? Ela ba'agafeha ulahachlif. So what are we talking about? Back to our picture, and this is the first explanation. We're talking about the banks, and the issue is, if the banks are less than 3 or less than 4, then what do we call them? A makom p'tur. Okay, now, a makom p'tur is generally less than 4, but let's go with, it's a makom p'tur. Okay, I'll explain in a minute why the less than 3, but let's take the less than 4 option. If it's a makom p'tur, then we're going to say, we can then carry, once it's no longer its own reshut, it's a makom p'tur, we can carry our dli from the window to the banks of the river, then, or to the channel, then from there to the channel, then we can get from reshut yachid to a Carmelit through a makom p'tur. That's what it means, lachlif. Okay? And then Tanakama would say, and then we'd have to say like this. Now, normally, and we're going to see this in a minute, we don't allow lahachlif. Lahachlif is only, remember, you can't take from Reshut Yachid to Reshut Rabim through the Makam P'tur. You can take from your private domain, put in the Makam P'tur. You can take from your public domain, put in the Makam P'tur, and bring it back. But you can't try to get your object from private to public going through the Makam P'tur. That's not allowed. So what you'd have to say is that maybe in this case, first of all, it's only a Carmelit. So we're going to talk about that in a minute. And maybe the debate between them is that there's 2 types of Makam P'tur according to Tanakama. Once you have a Makam P'tur that's less than 3, forget less than 4, it's a Makam P'tur, but less than 3, it's even less than a Makam P'tur, and then we can allow even lachlif. And maybe that's the machloka between them. At what point we allow lachlif? So now the Gemara is going to question this and say, wait a minute. You want to say that when Rav Dimi, right, so Ki'ata Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, right, now they're going to question. But wait, Ki'ata Rav Dimi Amar Rabbi Yochanan, when he came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Makom she'ein bo arba'a mutar l'bnei reshut yachidu l'bnei reshut rabim l'chatef alav. This is exactly what I just said about a Makam P'tur. You can use from private to Makam P'tur, from public to it. But bilvad shelo yachlifu, but you can't use it to get from one to the other. So how on earth would they allow this? So the answer, hatam reshuyot oraita, hacha reshuyot rabbanan. When he said lo yachlifu, he was talking about from private to public. That's forbidden by Torah law. So there we're not going to allow you to use the Makam P'tur to get from one to the other. But here we're talking about from your private domain to a Carmelit, which we only forbid by rabbinic law. Remember, Carmelit is only because it's similar to Reshut Rabim. It's not actually forbidden by Torah law. Therefore, we can be lenient and say, through a Makam P'tur, you can do it. And then the debate is only, does it have to be a 4, less than 4 Makam P'tur, or maybe a less than 3? But now they say, wait a minute. You're trying to say that according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says you can't do it in Rishiyot right, he would say you can do it in Rishiyot de Rabbanan. That's not true. Rabbi Yochanan Rishiyot de Rabbanan nami amar. He also forbade it in Rishiyot de Rabbanan. How do we know? Titnan, okay, again, the mistake here. It should be, this is a Mishnah. We learned this in a Mishnah. Now we're going to have a few minutes till we get to Rabbi Yochanan, or a few lines. This is good review. You have a wall, 10 high, 4 wide, in between 2 courtyards. Remember this? Marvin shnayim ve'em marvin echad. This separates between the 2. They can't make an eruv together. They can only make separate eruvs. Hayu b'rosho perot. If at the top of the wall was fruit, everyone can go up to the top and eat up at the top. Nifratz hakotel at 10 amot. If the wall breaks up until 10 cubits, marvin shnayim v'imratzu marvin echad. It can go both ways. Why? It's like an opening. So we can either view the opening as closed and say we're separate, or we can view the opening as open and say we're open. Yoter mikan, more than that, if it's breached more than 10, marvin echad ve'marvin shnayim. You can only make one eruv. You're viewed as one big space. Okay, what does this have to do with us? Now they ask the following question. What if the wall wasn't 4 tvachim wide? Now we get to these measurements. Because we have, once it's less than 4, each one can get to the top of the wall, right? It's not considered its own domain. So therefore, each one can have access. It's a makom p'tur. So each one can put things on, but what does it say? Because each one can get on, comes Rav and he says, the avir of both of them is sholetet. This goes back to our laws of Eruvin. Since they both have access, they forbid each other unless they have an Eruv. Okay, and therefore no one's allowed to use it. For Rabbi Yochanan, and this is what we were looking for, Amar, elu malim mikam v'ochlim ve'elu malim mikam v'ochlim. He says each can bring items up to the top and eat there. Now, what does it say though? Right? Va'az de Rabbi Yochanan l'tameh, and he goes according to his shita. Dechi ata Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan, makom she'en bo arba'a l'arba'a, mutar lebnei reshutei rabim ulebnei reshutei yachid lechatef alav, ubevad shelo yachlifu. He basically says this is an exempt space. Once it's an exempt space, I don't care that everybody has reshut to get here. The point is, right, and that they forbid each other. No, each one can come and put their items on because for them it's a reshutei yachid to a makom p'tur. Everyone can do that as long as what? They don't flip sides. They don't try to bring something from my courtyard to your courtyard. That you would need an Eruv for. Now, what do you see here? From my courtyard to your courtyard, that's Reshut that's Reshut Yachid to Reshut Yachid. That's only forbidden midrabanan. And yet Rabbi Yochanan says you can't switch from one to the other. So how can you say, again, where were we? We were trying to say that according to Rabbi Yochanan, he was talking about the banks. And the idea is that you're allowed to get your water from the Amah, from the channel, through the makom p'tur to your house. And it's just a debate. Is it 3 or 4 that we allow it, right? Less than 3 or less than 4. But you're allowed to do that. And here it seems, and because it's Rabbanan, and here it seems you're not allowed to do it. So the answer basically by saying, what we just quoted in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, the last thing about in the case of the kotel between the two, that's, let's just read this. Sorry, I lost my place for a minute. Okay, we're about 15 lines down or 13 lines down. That is Ze'eri's opinion, okay? That's not Rabbi Yochanan. Ze'eri said that Rabbi Yochanan said that, but we don't think Rabbi Yochanan said that. And really, Rabbi Yochanan would distinguish D'oraita de Rabbanan. And that's why the banks being 3. And that's the picture we saw. Now they say, okay, so, well, Ze'eri kashya, but Ze'eri is still going to be difficult, okay? Ze'eri doesn't make any sense then. How's Ze'eri going to explain it? Because according to Ze'eri, you can't move it through the banks. So like I said, we're going to have 3 different interpretations. So far, we saw one. Ha-Ze'eri mokim la ba'amat hamayim gufa. He says it's talking about the amat hamayim specifically, okay? The channel itself is less than 3 or less than 4, and that's the debate. And then you go back to the beginning. What did we say? What, does anyone really think a Carmelit is at 3 and not at 4? Because didn't Rav Dimi say it very simply? So according to Ze'eri, Rav Dimi Tanaihi. That actually is a machloket tanaim, which is fascinating. We basically, everything we've been saying until now, the Carmelites at 4 by 4, all of a sudden, this sugya seems to say that Tanakama thinks a Carmelit is at 3 by 3 already. So that's very interesting. Or 3 width. Okay, so now, Vitahave, now they question, wait, why wouldn't you say though, even if it itself, the channel isn't wide enough, why wouldn't you say it's like Kihore Carmelit? Why is it not like the holes of a Carmelit? What does that mean? If you have a wall in Reshut Rabim, we learned this a long time ago, and there's holes in the wall. Now the wall is 4 wide and 10 high, so it's a Reshut Yachid. So theoretically, you shouldn't be allowed to carry. But if there's holes in the wall and people use the holes to put things in, like they would store things in the wall, so it's for use of the Reshut Rabim, we consider those walls part of Reshut Rabim. So why wouldn't you say the same thing here? This channel comes from a bigger body of water, which is a Carmelit. So even though here it's very narrow, it comes from a bigger space. So why wouldn't you say we still treat it as Carmelit, even if it's less than 3 wide? It's a question on Ze'eri. So we're going to have a few answers. Abai bar Avin Rav Chanina bar Avin da'amri travayu ein chorin lekarmelit. Chorin is a chumrah that we use when it comes to, it relates to rishuyota oraita, not to something that we're defining midrabanan as a problem. So karmelit's only a rabbinic thing. So maybe you say there's no laws of chorin by karmelit. Rav Ashi amar afilu tema yesh chorin lekarmelit hanemile besmucha hacha b'mufleget. There, we were standing in Rishut Rabim, and right next to us is this wall and this hole in the wall. That is right next to it, so we could treat it as Rishut Rabim. Here, our channel is less than 4 or less than 3, and it's far away from the root, where it's coming from. So when it's far away, we don't judge it. We don't treat it as Chorei Karmelit. It would have to be adjacent. Third answer to our question now. We said 3 or 4, the machloka between Rashbag and Tanakama, again, has nothing to do with Lavud, according to what we saw. It's either, is it a makom p'tor that allows us to carry from one to the other, right, that we can get from the Rishut Yachid to the Karmelit, or is it that the Karmelit isn't really a Karmelit, the water's not a Karmelit because it's narrower, and the machloket is Karmelit at 3 or is it 4? Ravina Amar, and here we get back to Lavud. Da'avid la nifke apuma. What happened? We made outlets in the mechitza. Remember we had this mechitza going through the courtyard, okay? And it separated it so that the channel was our channel. But let's say in those mechitza, you made a channel, you wanted the water to go through to the next door courtyard. So if, again, now it's all lavud, if it's less than 3, according to Tanakama, then we view it as if the mechitza is still there. Once it gets to 3, no lavud anymore, you can't. According to Rashbag, it's lavud at 4. So you have up to 4 to open the channel before, right, to make this outlet, unless, right, as long as it's up to 4, it's okay. We're going to view it as if you still have a mechitza and allow it. And each one goes according to their approach about lavud. Okay, and then it goes back to that. Okay, new Mishnah. This is going to be a lot of review. Gizustra, shila malam in amayim. Ein memalin hemena b'Shabbat elim ken asula mechitza gvoha sarat tvachim bein milamala bein milamata. If you have this porch jutting out, again, this is not like Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya, which we're going to see in a minute. The Gemara is going to tell us that. But if you have a ledge out over the water, you can't fill up from there on Shabbat unless you make a 10 tvachim wall. Okay, bein milamala bein milamata, either above or below, as we said earlier. This is also a repeat of something we saw before. Zo lamala mizo, in other words, the Mishnah is not repeating it, but we saw it already quoted in the Gemara. If you have one higher than the other and they're next to each other, remember, then if asula el yonah, they made a mechitza for the upper one, but lo asula tachtona, the bottom one didn't have a mechitza, so the bottom one had no way of getting water. The only way the bottom one could get water was by using the gezustra of the upper one. Shtehen asurot ad shiarvu. Since the bottom one has rights to the upper one, and we're going to have a whole debate in the Gemara later, tomorrow's daf, about in what case does he have rights, in what case doesn't he, etc. But assuming now he can access it, since he can access it, no one can use it until they make an eruv, because reshut shtehem, right? They both have rights to be there. So the Gemara tells us, the Mishnah clearly doesn't match his opinion. Again, review from the beginning of today's daf. Tanya, Chananya ben Akavya Omer, Gezustra sheyesh ba arba al arba amot, chokek ba arba al arba, arba al arba'a, umemale. Right? If you have 4 by 4 cubits, you make a whole 4 by 4 handbreadths, and then you can basically, right, imagine all the mechitzot drop down, and you would have a solution. And Amar Rabbi Yochanan, he just adds this, Mishum Rabbi Yossi ben Zimra, lo itir Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya ela b'yamashal Tveria. This we saw also. He only permitted this kind of thing in the Kinneret. Ho'il v'yesh la'ugnim v'ayarot v'karpifot mikifot ota. Aval b'shar memot lo. Any other body of water? No, this has high banks, people around, populated, and therefore it has this appearance like it's private. It's not a karmelit. It's not this big wide open space that's just, like you think of a yam and it's just open entirely. It's not. Tano Rabbanan. From here we start a braita about 3 things that Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya allowed in Tveria. We'll talk about 2 of them today, and the third one we'll get to tomorrow. It's in tomorrow's daf. Shlosha dvarim hitir Rabbi Chananya ben Akavya l'anshei Tveria. Okay, for the people in Tveria, he gave them 3 heterim. Mimali mayim migezustra b'Shabbat, that's ours. Tomnim ba'atza, we'll get to that in 1 minute. Umistapkim ba'alontit. Okay, you can dry yourselves with towels, okay, on Shabbat. We're going to get to that tomorrow, what that is. Mimali mayim migezustra b'Shabbat hadamara, that's ours. Tomnim ba'atza maihi. So what's this tomnim ba'atza? Ditanya. Hishkim lavi psolet. If you went outside early in the morning to get twigs or things that were outside, you gathered them up and you wanted to keep right without refrigeration. You wanted to keep your stuff cold, protect it from the sun. So you put it under all these things that you collect in the morning. Now, what's the problem? You went and you did it early. Now, if there's something called shiur lekabel tumah, which is if you're going to now put it on top of your fruits. It's wet from the dew because you went early in the morning. So now it has dew. The dew gets on the produce. The produce becomes shiur lekabel tumah. He said to them, I'm allowing you to do this, and it's not considered that your fruits are going to be shiur lekabel tumah. They're not going to be susceptible to impurities. Why? If you remember, with susceptible to impurities, it needs to be one of the 7 liquids. One of them happens to be dew. But it has to be that you intended for the water, the liquid to get on the item. Now, why'd you go early in the morning? There's 2 possibilities. Either you went early in the morning because you wanted the wet, you wanted the moistness of it, and then it would be intentional, and then it would be shiur lekabel tumah. You could have gone early in the morning, right? Why do people exercise super early in the morning? Because they don't have time during the day. They're working during the day. If they wouldn't work, they wouldn't make money. So 2 possibilities as to why you go in the morning. So here we go. He says you can do it. So why? Where does this come from? Ditanya. Hishkim lavi psolet. It says in the Braita, if you woke up early to bring psolet, if you wanted specifically to have the water, the dew, and that's why, the moisture, and that's why you went early, then hareu b'chiyutan. This is intentional putting on. That's the pasuk by susceptibility to impurity. But if you just wanted to not get to work late and miss time that you'd be working and making money, eino b'chiyutan, then you obviously didn't want the dew to get on there. It's just you went early for that reason. And what did he say about Anshe Tveria? Stam Anshe Tveria kamisha lo yibatal mimelachto dami. These people are hard workers, and maybe also they didn't have a lot of money and they couldn't afford to go to work late. So therefore, for them, it was allowed. Okay, we'll get tomorrow to what this mistapkim ba'alon tit is and why he allowed specifically Anshe Tveria. Have a good day, everybody.